Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator, and pardon me while I whip this out. Alright, here we go. The Vintage Future RPG. It's one of my compilations, which is to say that it's several books all in one volume to create kind of a larger, quote unquote, completer game experience. Shadow and Sun had been kind enough to do a review of it, and there's been a little uptick in sales, so I thought I'd, I guess, give some basic game master advice on exactly what to do with this and how to use the materials in it. There are two actual core game rule books in this. There's Escape from Planet Matriarchy and Rocket Cadets in the 11th Dimension. Escape from Planet Matriarchy is the first one in there because it kind of sets the tone, for the whole setting. Albeit it's more of a game that you want to play with a slightly more mature audience. This isn't a good one for little kids. It's one for older teens, young adults. Retro future. It's about a crew of NASA astronauts from the year 1975 who get shot into the future Buck Rogers style and crash land on the moon of Titan to discover that it's been colonized by women who've been isolated from males for centuries, and various hijinks ensue. The very presence of a bunch of men from the past immediately kind of starts to melt down the society. It's the game where I have a feature for the male gaze, this kind of psychic phenomenon where a large amount, though not all, of the women on Titan, when encountering men for the first time, are just kind of like overcome by it and can't deal with it, and their morale starts to melt. This is, to be stressed, only something that is a feature in Escape from Planet Matriarchy. It is not universal to the entire setting or to the rule system. In fact, as the story progresses into the source books, eventually, the women of Titan develop a vaccine against the male gaze, and so, and We Want Soviet Men, the sequel adventure, that's not as much of an issue anymore. And if there's any females in the crew of the NASA astronauts who got shot into the future, they're not affected by it. And women on other planets and starships and stuff are not affected by it. It's purely a thing found on Titan as a byproduct of their isolation and the genetic manipulations that the women of Titan have undergone in order to be able to maintain their population and continue to breed and create new generations without the Y chromosome in play. It seems, obviously there's heavy comedic overtones to it, and obviously trying to burst a bubble, take the piss out of it, as it were, try to lighten the mood by making fun of something that we're not supposed to be making fun of. But as I said, though, that makes it a bit more kind of a niche kind of adventure campaign module. It is designed, the characters land there, and then it's kind of an open sandbox how things evolve. There's going to be stuff going on in the background, but exactly how they want to go about escaping Planet Matriarchy is largely up to them. Rocket Cadets in the 11th Dimension is supposed to be the more kind of universal answer to that. Set in the same setting. Characters are also, once again, NASA astronauts, but they're cadets and they're from the 25th century, and they're part of a ship crew of training cadets that get sucked into another dimension. Hence the title, Rocket Cadets in the 11th Dimension. This is more your game that you can set with pretty much people of any age. Because of the fact that my rule system is pretty easy to learn. It's probably out of the stuff that's in Vintage Future RPG, it's your good introductory one, especially for younger players. All the psychosexual shit is not involved in that one at all, and because it's set in another dimension, there's there's no risk of cross contamination between the two adventure lines, so to say. But that book gives you some basic starship creation rules. Game masters kind of have their own pre-built self-insert NPC in the form of the cadet instructor that's running the ship, but all the rest of the ship operations will be player characters. You might also have some extra cadet NPCs in the background on the ship in case one of the player characters gets killed. The 11th dimension setting, once again, is a bit of a sandbox. It starts off, they're thrown in there, but it's kind of up to them how they want to proceed to explore this strange nebula of breathable gas. As I like to say, it's got, some Flash Gordon overtones to it, a little hint of Spelljammer. I keep forgetting in the last video I made about it to mention that there's also Heavy Metal, the old comic book Heavy Metal, or the original animated movie Heavy Metal. The ones that have the heavy World War II, aeronautic kind of stuff going on. That sort of imagery and themes are also worked into how the 11th dimension operates. As a setting, you got several different alien races, all kind of doing their own thing there. It's open for exploration. There's a potential threat of some sort of extra-dimensional invasion that wants to get to Earth, and the only thing that's holding them back is their lack of rocket technology, and the cadets themselves might end up accidentally introducing that rocket technology to the forces of Queen Emilia. In combination with Escape from Planet Matriarchy and the Planet Matriarchy, a sequel adventure, We Want Soviet Men, which is also included in Vintage Future RPG. You can also, on your own, just use the information about the various planets in the solar system and the character creation to just create your own, campaign concept and adventures, just using the setting and the rules and the character creation system. You're not necessarily forced to have to adventure on Planet Matriarchy or go into the 11th dimension. We Want Soviet Men is, I guess you could say, a little bit of a Star Trek parody. This is an alternate timeline. Obviously, the moons of Jupiter, the Galilean moons, were conquered and colonized by the Soviet Union centuries ago, and that's basically where the Soviet dream is still maintained. The starships are sentient, and we want Soviet men. If you're playing a Soviet, campaign, one of the players can actually play the starship if they so choose, albeit that's obviously going to be limiting in many different factors, but it could be fun. The ships themselves are in charge of themselves. They don't really have captains. All the crewmen have the same rank of comrade. As I said, it's kind of like a parody of a little bit of Star Trek, of a communist ship, exploring the universe and all that kind of stuff, and how they might get entangled in the events of Escape from Planet Matriarchy, obviously, if you don't want to just use it as just kind of a free-floating campaign concept. There's two other books I included in here that are not as directly related to the events of the 25th century in the setting, but do provide background information. Ancient Egypt Conquers Mars is set in the 11th century BC, on Mars. It's a ancient Egypt source book, obviously, but I included it because there's information in it that kind of informs the background setting, especially for some of the things that you'll discover in Rocket Cadets in the 11th Dimension, saying that part of when Mars was destroyed and the Martians and Olympian civilization was wiped out, they were kind of teleported into the 11th Dimension. And so there's this kind of like hollow shell of Mars' old original surface as one of the worlds in the 11th dimension. And so knowing exactly how all that was shaped and formed, is good as a game master, just so you kind of understand what the story is. Also provides a few other options for, things you can use as aliens and ancient starship technology and all that kind of stuff you can throw in your games just to throw in a little bit more spice. It's definitely something that probably you'd want to use a bit more with Rocket Cadets in the 11th Dimension than with Escape from Planet Matriarchy. I also tossed in Science of the Sphinx. The Sphinx, in my setting, are an alien race that, throughout time has been viewed as various things from human mythology, from angels to griffins to, Sphinx. In the 25th century, their civilization is also trapped in the 11th Dimension, where they are known as the Man-Eagles. And, just so, once again, so that game masters can feel more informed about, this alien race that player characters are potentially interacting with, maybe even allying with, if not becoming enemies of. Science of the Sphinx helps ground you into, the weird, quasi-mystical, pseudo-science of their backstory. Although it does stretch across the entire timeline of my games, and so there is lots of, obvious hints about things going on in various other settings and whatnot. Because, God forbid I slightly plug some of my other games to people who've bought one of my games. Now, obviously, as I said, this is a compilation. If you individually buy all the books that are in here, you don't need this, and vice versa. There's no additional material. There's nothing bonus about it. If you have all 5 books already, then you already have this. If you buy this, you don't need to buy the 5 books that are listed in this. If you were to buy a bunch of the compilations, be warned, there are some source books that repeat throughout multiple compilations because they're useful to several different settings. I try to price it in such a way that hopefully if you do find yourself that you've done that, you didn't spend more than you would have anyway to get the same amount of books, hopefully. But the idea of the compilation is so that ideally you could pick up, the core rule book and a couple of source books and save a little dough than what it would cost if you were to go and buy them all individually. However, once again, though, because of, printing costs and all that kind of stuff, this is just a purely black and white version. If you want the color version so you can see the color version of all the classic, pulp fantasy art and stuff that's featured in these, then there is your incentive there to go ahead and get the smaller versions, at least as far as print goes. The PDFs, the PDF of this is not in black and white. It's all full color imagery. Just a slight bonus for people who feel like having a PDF is enough to satisfy their urge to add to their collection. I myself am a bookshelf person who likes seeing my stuff. And I have enough of these things that even though they are the slightly smaller paperback format compared to the larger letter-sized RPG books that we're used to, but I got enough of them, you can fill up a whole shelf with these suckers. So be sure to check them out. As always, I'm trying not to steer people wrong. I'm not trying to present this as anything more than it is. All these books were written and created entirely on a Chromebook. So, if you're looking for high, super productive qualities like you'd get out of something from Wizards of the Coast, you're not getting that. I don't have an editing department besides the computer telling me if I misspelled something. I don't have a graphic design department. I don't have any artists and stuff. It's just public domain imagery, but it's enough to get the idea across of the tone and what things are supposed to look like. And, I just still have this weird thing where I assume that game masters actually have their own imagination and don't need to have their hand held so damn much to be able to figure out how to use these things. But anyway, if any of that seems interesting to you, check out links below, and you'll be able to find yourself your own copy of Vintage Future RPG on Amazon.com or DriveThru RPG. And until next time, stay waspinated.